Today we're here to chat about immersive art. How many of us have been to the Van Gogh experience, or we've seen Tejal Patni's show right here at the near the entrance of Art Mumbai, or we've been to see Yaya Kusama's the Infinity Room, right? Immersive art experiences we've seen more and more of these recently, and they're really quite fantastic. You're not just viewing the art, but you become a part of the art. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about what that means, how we feel about it, and whether this is something that we're going to see more of in the future. I'd like to introduce you all to our moderator, Vasudha Narayanan. Vasudha is an artist, curator, and creative director at the Swaddle. Previously, she was features editor for The Irregular Times and was curator at the Mumbai Urban Art Biennale 2022. I'd like to now invite Vasudha to introduce the rest of our panel. Thank you. Should I do it here? Fine. Yeah, okay.
Hello, thanks everyone for coming. I'm just going to quickly introduce our panelists. We have with us Tejal Patni, originally from India, moved to Dubai in the 1980s and is a graduate of the Sir J.J. School of Applied Arts in Mumbai and the London Film Academy. Known for his whimsical, imaginative style, he has collaborated with global brands like Harvey Nichols, Bloomingdale's, Chanel, Hugo Boss, and publications such as GQ, Grazia, and Harper's Bazaar. His renowned Splash calendar work has earned him widespread recognition. In early 2024, Patni presented his Vichitra immersive art exhibit at Snowball Studios, a unique exploration of human differentiation and whimsical storytelling. Patni's visual language bridges fantasy with craftsmanship, leaving a profound mark in photography and film. Welcome, Tejas.
Thank you.
We also have with us Odyssée Bouvyer. She's the head of development and partnerships at Avesta Group and leads the efforts to expand the company's footprints in developing cultural markets, extend its service offerings to respond to market needs, and solidify partnerships to widen its reach across the culture sector value chain. She has a rich background working with esteemed cultural institutions, which she guides in venturing into temporary exhibitions to attract repeat visitors. In the past, Odyssey collaborated with Culture Spaces, a French exhibition events and digital arts agency operating internationally, where she spearheaded new partnerships and fundraising initiatives by leveraging a cultural network of museums and heritage sites. Odyssey also supports emerging artists and is passionate about contemporary creation and global art market mechanisms. She regularly recommends strategies for increasing culture sector sustainability. Welcome, Odyssey.
Very cool. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Fatema Pittalwala. Her career spans in policy research, political consultancy, political data analysis, and an Indian modern contemporary art specialist. She was formerly a policy researcher for a member of Rajya Sabha and the Observer Research Foundation. She then worked in multiple elections from UP state elections, where she campaigned in Western UP and traveled to over 60 villages to President Obama's campaign in 2012 for Pennsylvania in the United States. After moving back from New York, she was actively involved in the Indian art auction, space, where she worked at Pundols and Christie's. She remains passionately and academically in tune with the art space. She has worked with Reliance Industries Limited since 5 years and currently works with the Art House, Geo World Center as their art curator. Thank you. All right, I'm really glad to be here with you all, and let's just get started. So before everything else, I have a very basic question to ask each of you, which is, what do you define immersive art as in today's cultural landscape? And Tejas, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. So for me, I noticed with the first exhibit and it all started with just it being an experimental effort, and I never knew that it's going to fireball, right? So for me, and this is my second show, and feel very blessed to be here, and the response in terms of people rather than seeing something on the wall to witnessing something and being a part of it as you started. To me, it's just extremely fascinating. And it's just not me doing it as an artist, but the responses of people, and their reactions to, it's like different emotions just floating through the entire exhibit hall is just fantastic. So yeah, I just feel that for me, I feel that immersive art is definitely here to stay in whatever form we do. Yeah.
I think for me, when I was thinking about this topic and immersive art, I thought about our senses. So we have the sight, sound, smell, touch, and we as humans need all our senses to work, especially in this digital age. For us to only use one particular sense is now no more that exciting. And I think that kind of reflecting our times and, artists, institutions, or just what people, collectively want as an experience is at least using two of their senses at the same time. So, for instance, Subodh Gupta, he uses his artwork where he has the bartans, as everyone knows. But then he also likes cooking in his art space and using the same vessel to give people a second layer, third dimensional experience where you eat the food that the artist makes and you're with the artist and within his artwork. And I think that format of experience, whether it is in exhibitions, whether it's through the artist, whether it's through digital media or technology, is what I think people collectively as a society want. And I think that's my interpretation of what, at this point, immersive experiences and art is.
I totally agree. So to me, I will just complete, basically. Immersive art is also an opportunity to reach the universal ambition of art through access and through collective experience. An experience that is collective not only in terms of belonging, but also participating. To a large extent, we see immersive art as something that is sometimes making audiences passive, but this has not been really my experience. With immersive exhibitions and immersive artworks, you see people engage with the art, you see children running around, touching, engaging, laughing, feeling much freer than within more traditional exhibition spaces. So to me, it goes to the widening of what art can offer to communities today and to the widening of participation within that field.
Tejas, do you want to add to that?
Sorry, both of you just said it absolutely rightly. One thing I want to add is the inclusion part, right? As you said, the senses. I think that's extremely important, and to give that wonderfulness to people to experience. I think that itself is such a brilliant idea.
I completely agree. I went in the morning to your space. And I saw the blood banks on top, and I freaked out a bit because I'm scared of blood.
We all are.
And I think that's probably you wanted like some reaction from the audience, right? And I went in and I felt, okay, is this a person sitting on the chair? And I looked and I was like, yeah, of course she is. And it was mind-boggling.
Thank you. And just to add, sorry, is last time you mentioned about kids, right? I had a girl probably around 6 years of age, and her mom sent me a poetry written by her about my exhibit, And this time I had another child who drew the eyes, and her mom came to me yesterday and showed me her drawing. So if I'm touching everybody, I think it's fantastic. Yeah.
So I guess I have a two-pronged question. One is that there is a proliferation of immersive art experiences globally, whether we think of the 360 Van Gogh experience or the Infinity Room or the toilet paper installation at NMACC. Firstly, I wonder what you all think about these extractions of perhaps traditional artworks that are being expanded across mediums in these very immersive ways, and how that's you've spoken about making it more inclusive in terms of the kinds of audiences it touches, but one is, why is there such a wide proliferation of immersive art experiences? And secondly, Fatima, you spoke a little bit about Subodh Gupta's exhibition, where there are all these bartans, he's cooking something, you're in it. There is I want to say there's a blend in terms of what we look at immersive art, what is site-specific installation, what is, say, a performance. It's all become, I think we've clubbed all of that to define that as an immersive experience. And I wonder why that is. Is it that we've run out of ways to experience or talk about it? Is it because exhibitions today are expanding their scope of work to include all of this into, getting people through the door? What's happening?
So, I'm gonna do a sensory experiment to that answer. I want everyone to think about, you walk into this door and, you just imagine you seeing flowers that you can, digitally touch. A burst of rose scent is being sprayed in this room. There are probably frogs jumping. You're trying to catch them, but of course it's a digital frog that's jumping around. There's a school of fish passing by. Imagine you're freaked out by that, and that's effectively team lab experience for you right there. Or it was one of the exhibitions that we did at Art House, which was the toilet paper, where every sensory experience was kind of touched upon. And think about all those emotions that came to your mind when I just described it verbally. Now, once you're in that box of space, and it could be, I'm talking specifically of immersive exhibitions, so I'm going to this specific category, where artists, or whether it's different production agencies or institutions, are using art and technology to bring this kind of experience. And it is unique, which is what I think, what I really like. Whereas if I differentiate these experiences to, say, for instance, experience where you're using a master's painting and you're saying you're bringing that into a digital format, it's a very different kind of immersive experience, which is nothing wrong about it, but I think it's a different thought process. It's for different, a wider audience, and that's, there is space for that as well. So I think that's my 2 bits on how we differentiate those 2 elements.
Right. Odyssey, do you want to respond to that?
Yes. So yes, I agree. There are some very different categories here that need to be explored. Maybe within the master's expansion, there's absolutely value in my view, as it reaches out to audiences that don't really feel legitimate necessarily in walking into traditional museums, and it also brings some very detailed view of some artworks that are sometimes so precious, so difficult to conserve and to have traveled the world, that it also brings to audiences that are sometimes very remote from these collections an access that they would not have otherwise. That said, it's true that when we talk about immersive, there is, in terms of value added for audiences, a very different approach when you're thinking about spaces that are unique creations, elements that are really built for a specific audience in a specific location, and that speak to the context where they are created, which you do not find when you have a touring Van Gogh, for example. And so in terms of what people retain and the emotion that they feel, I feel like immersive can be a stepping stone and a way to reach new meaning and new experiences, but it can also be something that is very surfacey in a way. So I'd say that I think museums and spaces today, looking at the institutional side of things, are very enthusiastic about these types of programming because they are sold on the idea that it's going to bring in new audiences, that it's going to maybe even bring in new funding, because these experiences, we're seeing that the willingness to pay of audiences is very high compared to traditional exhibitions. But at the same time, what organizations that build these exhibitions don't necessarily know when they embark on these journey is that it also comes at a very high cost to produce, and that people don't necessarily return to these exhibitions once they've seen them once. So you also have to think about these in terms of long-term investment and the fact that, well, if you're building this as a permanent collection, for example, as an institution, is it going to be meaningful in the long term for your audiences, or is it going to be a very short-lived value?
Yeah, definitely. They just, you want to add?
I mean, they both said it beautiful, so I don't want to repeat any of that. But to me, at least where I am right now, I just feel that digital art or immersive art in that sense, of course, is very space driven. Also, you need a certain space, you need the largeness of the space to people to go through it. Of course, Van Gogh, I share the same sentiment or similar sort of feeling. But for me, the way I'm working towards it is even tomorrow, if somebody gives me a space in the middle of the road, I'll do a story, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, so for me, I mean, that's my journey, I guess.
Fair enough. I mean, from an artistic perspective, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, there was a light and space movement in the 60s and 70s where artists like James Turrell, Doug Wheeler, Robert Irwin were using light as a tool to expand notions of space and time. But as technology has evolved and, the idea is to create darker rooms that become so immersive that the idea is to take you into a magical experience that sort of deracinates the reality that we're surrounded by, perhaps, whether it's the social or political reality. So I wonder what you all think about that, and what I guess the role of the artist is in these sorts of ecosystems, because I feel like these days museums they have to adapt to the times. People are using digital more, engaging with screens more, but there is an ecosystem responsibility, if you will, and I wonder what you all have to say about that.
I mean, I find it very fascinating. I know you spoke about the 60s and 70s light movement, but, for me to think that when there was no internet, there was no like the technology that we see it today. And for these artists, I mean, I know you didn't talk about Kusama, but starting with Kusama and all the artists, for whether it's Robert Irwin, whether it's Flavin, things like that, for them to think of an immersive artwork at that point of time, in this moment is very exciting for me, because I'm just like, how did they come up with these ideas? And they really saw the future that, okay, when people come to see these artworks, or in Kusama's case, and where to see her infinity rooms, people are going to have phones. It's going to look amazing on their phone. And what is an image on a phone? It is a form of immersiveness, right? That people say that, okay, I'm here, I'm seeing the artwork, but it looks also great on my phone. And that's also immersive in its own way. And I think that futuristic ability of these artists is how they are relevant today in a very different way. They might not have, I mean, of course, they might have never imagined that. I'm sure, Kusama has definitely not imagined that. But I think the fact that there is that accessibility towards their artworks is just incredible. And I think celebrating that for me is something important personally to me.
I wanted to add something here in terms of the value for audiences also. When we think of immersive experiences, there is a degree to which audiences react and want to engage. Today, when we poll audiences, we see that the number one reason for going to a museum is to actually share time with their loved ones, with people close to them, have quality time. And immersive experiences done, let's say, in an isolating way, think of VR, for example, actually go to the opposite direction of that yearning from audiences. So one has to also think about what is the goal. If you're doing VR in a museum, what are you adding compared to what someone could access in their own room at home? You're giving them access to the technology, so maybe that's interesting. But at the same time, think about what AR can do. So augmented reality, you're still participating, you're still within the room, still meeting people, still engaging with the others. And at the same time, you have this added layer of experience. Some museums now, and I'm thinking about French museums who are very interesting in that, the Natural History Museum in Paris is now using AR as a tool to bring back to life extinct species and to activate its galleries and its collections in a way that is really engaging and in a way that also brings us a new level of interest from younger generations for galleries that can be seen as dusty, as old, it's all wooden panels. So they keep the heritage, they keep the scientific value, but at the same time, they bring in audiences with a new twist and a new type of real learning values through AR, but in a way that is still a moment for the whole family to have a shared moment together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about as you both are speaking is that how our audiences, you've spoken to that a little bit about how they engage with immersive art installations, but especially spatial installations. But you said that, one of the challenges is getting people through the door beyond that one-time interaction, right? The first time they experience it, they've experienced all of it. So what is in it for them to come back again? So essentially, one is, how do audiences get their money's worth? And then from a sort of immersive art experience, and especially as an artist, there's this sense of, like, we're curating an enigma. There's this metaphysical, this idea of curating the metaphysical into a very physical sort of realm. But how does that carry forward that experience from an artistic point of view? Is it erasing the real? Is it trying to substitute the real? Is it amplifying the real? What does that look like? And I guess how you spoke about bringing back extinct species, but are people, but also museums, really interested in building that connection between the past, the present, and an imagined future? I guess that's multiple questions in one, but
I already told him he should go first.
I mean, maybe Tejal can speak to it from an artist's perspective.
By the way, I'm always a great listener. So, okay, so, wow. Okay.
You have all the audiences. What are you worried about?
There's some paid audiences. No, so very interesting question. So again, sorry, but I'm just speaking for myself, right? So for me, yes, I am struggling right now to put a show like this, but I know somewhere I'll get there. And the reason for that thought is, just to give you an example, right? In this case, Birla Opus is the sponsor of the event, right? Now, yesterday, the team came to me and spoke to me. And they said, we just love the way you use color, So I said, okay, that gives me an idea for future, to rope somebody like them in to do it, because it's very true for the audience to bring back. Okay, now I've been lucky where maybe people have managed to buy tickets twice, or they swindle some passes, etc. But I did have I did have people coming back to the gallery, and that was really nice. And I think in the real world as well, we need that again and again for people to actually, and for it to be sustainable, as you said, to put something like this. But for me, again, I mean, I'm at a space where I'm just trying to solve my own puzzle, right? Because I've seen so much in my life, and yeah, I'm finding a foothold for myself. So sorry, I mean, that's all I can say.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
I think from a institution point of view, what we've seen is essentially that that audience. I feel that especially young people are looking to transcend from that existing environment, and I have constantly noticed that. And if it is an immersive exhibition, it gives them that moment of transcendence, because no one is looking at a sunrise anymore. No one is looking at a sunset anymore. But if you take them to a James Turrell exhibition and you show them like the sunrise through his artwork, that works for them. And it gives them that moment of peace, which, everyone is looking for, because the way our society has evolved globally. And I think when that feeling is touched in the exhibition, and of course, if it is visually looks good on Instagram, if the two combine, people are willing to pay a lot of money for that ticket and come for the exhibition. And the hope for artists is that if they touch upon that, it allows an audience that probably never went to a museum because they said, oh, this is too art history heavy, I don't get it, why do we have to be quiet, why can't we take food, why do we have to, things like, simple things like that. That's like the feedback I keep getting. Oh, it's like a visual overwhelmingness that I don't, it's too much for me, I'm too awkward there. But in this space, they feel comfortable. And the hope is that once they come, they learn something and they might become a museum goer in the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I was thinking while you were talking about this demand that we've had. Avesta works a lot in the Middle East, and the enormous worry that the new emerging institutions have in the Middle East is to have audiences have so much choice in terms of different museums, in terms of different artistic experiences, that they actually feel overwhelmed and don't necessarily go, or go once for the pre-openings and then don't necessarily return for new exhibitions, for when all of the collections are finally open, etc. So what we've worked on with the Ministry of Culture in Saudi Arabia recently is a new idea to bring audiences to the museum from day one, but also make them return and make them go to all the regional museums as well, and especially targeting young people. And it's still in the development process, and it's, it takes a long time to develop, but they wanted a tool to get audiences before the museums even opened to be interested in these collections and to feel close to them and directly from their phone. Sorry, I don't even have my phone with me, but
That's amazing.
And so we proposed to create an app for them where people would engage with the art that is not only in collections, but also everywhere around them, because universal museums are actually all around them. They inform the design of the houses we live in. They inform what we have in our homes. They inform our cultural habits. And so we're creating a tool where young audiences can actually engage with art in the same way that people have engaged in the past few years with, let's say, Pokemon Go, where they will at home start learning about a quest and go to the museum on this hunt, learn about the art, really engage with it, spend more time looking at the pieces than they would usually. It's very depressing when you work in museums and you learn that people on average spend 1 to 3 seconds looking at an artwork. Well, imagine kids with their app doing their little quest, trying to seek information, clues, etc., within the artworks. And of course, they're looking at their phone half of the time, but the rest of that time, they're engaging with the collections, They're going around the museum, and they're also becoming ambassadors for other kids to also come and participate in such a project. So this is also what you can do, and it's not immersive in the way that you're in a dark room with some, shiny colors on the walls, but it's immersive in a much deeper meaning, I would say, in terms of engagement, in terms of really learning, and in terms of also making it fun for a very wide type of audiences.
Of course, yeah.
May I add to it?
Please, please.
So something that me and my partner at Snowballs, something that we want to develop eventually is, so my ultimate goal is to work with Pharrell Williams and do a Dior show, right?
Okay.
So imagine if I created this beautiful world for him and he just has his models. So that's where we want to reach, and we hopefully will. But in the meanwhile, what Vichitra wants to do is to do amazing collabs with musicians, okay, fashion designers, okay. Obviously, the collection needs to be pretty relevant to the belief of
Right.
Vichitra, and so is the music. So I see, honestly, a lot of hope, in terms
Right.
of where it's heading. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
From the perspective of commercial viability, we briefly spoke about this. How important is it for institutions to be elastic in this moment in time, especially with respect to building around a specific purpose that has a sustained long-term vision and a sustained long-term ideology that isn't just rooted in, hey, okay, here's a room, what can I do in this space, versus thinking through all aspects of it, immersing people in the past, in the present, encouraging learning. How can institutions create that kind of an environment, and how important is it to build around that specific purpose?
Very wide question once again. Just starting with sustainability in terms of the economic viability of an institution, you must all know how expensive it is to run a museum and to conserve collections and activate them. Very often we have museums that come to us, or future museums teams that come to us and ask us, well, we have this broom and we want to make an immersive exhibition out of it, and we're like, do you know what is your goal in terms of engagement with your audiences? What do you want them to retain from it when they leave? What do you want them to learn there? What is your narrative, your storytelling? I mean, we can develop that, but if you have no idea from the start, then you're off on the wrong foot, because it's a very fund-intensive process to create immersive content. And if you want it to be sustainable in the long term, it needs to be both adaptive and relevant in terms of what it brings to the rest of your collections. So one way that museums today are making it sustainable over the long term is to have content and intellectual property that they can tour. And the other way is to have content that is really adaptable and that evolves with the technologies also. Because when you create a space that is immersive in nature, you would be amazed by how fast this gets obsolete. Yeah. You're talking about the hardware in terms of your new headset or your new projectors. 1 year later, you'll have changed the projectors once. So that's an enormous investment again. And you'll have audiences who are like, oh, but I saw this at Team Lab or at there, and it's actually much better. So you have to keep up afterwards. You have to make it new all the time. So even if your content itself is amazing, you'll need to constantly adapt it. So there are new models for institutions now to keep this going, whereby I wouldn't advise an institution to invest in the tech itself, but to invest in the content, in the intellectual property, and to have it adapted from one technology to the next, so that they remain relevant and they keep up, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of money invested for not a lot of time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in fact, a really interesting example of an institution that's done something similar is the Louvre. The Louvre recently announced that they're going to take over Grand Palais and they're going to do a Mona Lisa immersive experience there. And initially, I was reading about the article and I thought, like, how do I feel about this? But the way that they are going to be doing it is going to be informative. And as you said, they have the intellectual property rights. They're renting the technology for it. Of course, they've chosen a fabulous space. So it's not just a room, a wide cube room. And that's something also I feel that, that makes the experience a bit more different because if the space is a little more unique, the experience of whatever you're projecting is also unique. And I think that what Louvre is doing, they're using just this one painting, which is of course the most famous painting in the world. You have to wait for lines and lines, and there are layers to see the Mona Lisa, and it's giving us the opportunity, the viewer, to see it and be a part of the work. And I think in this case, the Louvre is really doing it well with using information about Mona Lisa and giving that immersive experience outside their museum space, which I also thought was again interesting. So they're making that distinction.
Yeah, as an former art student, my sort of criticism of that is that it takes away the aura of the artwork, and
Well, you reached the artwork in this
but if
case.
you reach the artwork, yeah, and I wonder. I mean, we can talk about that in detail, but Tejas, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so yesterday there was this lovely lady who just came up to me and she said, I'd like to ask you for something. And I said, yeah, please. And she runs or helps a disabled community of sorts, yeah? And she said, what you've done with Spot the Difference is exactly what I'm trying to teach or, pass on there with my group of people. So I said, what would you like me to do? So she said, is it possible that you can, I know we don't have the bandwidth, etc., to do something like this. But so I said, is it possible for you to bring some of them here? And she said, yeah, that would be a good idea. Of course, a lot of challenges with that. So for us, I just see that how beautiful is that, man? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, art actually reaching another side of life, to help people. So for me, I'm just finding these lovely things as I go, man. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, in India especially, there are institutions like Accessibility for All that are creating, tangible sort of art experiences. So, I mean, one of the things is that there is this larger criticism that immersive art is just sort of lightweight and entertainment, but it is also reaching a far wider audience outside of people who can see or hear. It creates these tangible experience that extend the majority. So how do you all reconcile with these ideas and notions through the kind of practices that you all are working in?
I think just a first point, immersive can be seen in many different ways, and the immersion can be not only in the artwork itself, if we're talking about an old master painting, for example, but also in all of the skills and competencies and jobs that go around showcasing, learning, researching, and conserving an artwork like this one, like, let's say the Mona Lisa, for example. One can envision also immersive experiences that do not just go to the topic or the surface, the physical aspect of the artwork, but also all of the skill sets and the teams that work on this type of artwork to make them go down the ages and be still there for audiences to see in the future. To a large extent, there's an opportunity, I would say, for museums to bridge the gap between documentary and artwork, very self-sufficient and self-contained artwork, if they're wanting audiences to really gain something in terms of learning. You can add some, and there's a butterfly here to greet us.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Very immersive. There is a lot of things that can be done with these technologies in terms of bringing together learning, experience, wonderment, as well as engagement. When we think immersive arts, often, as I was saying earlier, we think passivity, but actually more and more artists right now are engaging with audiences in a way that the audience is really the actor, the player, and they're engaging with them as creators using technologies developed originally for video games, where the audience are the ones who create their own artwork, their own way of building upon a first formula that's created by the artist. So I think when we expand this,
art stacking, is it called?
Yes.
yeah, you can use it with AI, with art stacks. I mean, at the Biennale in Venice, it was very interesting what the different artists were doing with this. And there's, yes, probably a lot of opportunity to go different types of rabbit holes if we're, inventive with these technologies.
Absolutely. I think for me, personally, I feel that we, in India, especially to your question, we have space for everything. I think we're a very new market when it comes to being museum goers, art lovers, immersive experiences, institutions. We have, for us, it's a empty canvas, and I think we can fill in all those categories personally. Like, say, for example, in Bombay, there's a museum that opened up at Fort. I forget the name, but it's an immersive museum got from Norway, and it's a combination of science, technology, and
Are you talking about Muso?
muso.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I think that, when I read about it, I said that, okay, this is interesting that they thought that there is an audience here that would be open to buying tickets, and that they're doing pretty well. I know that. The Van Gogh came here. We have new foundations, new institutions opening. Even, I mean, something like this, I was thinking about the art fair here. Outside, we have 3 immersive experiences for audiences to engage differently, and we have the traditional galleries, and we have the KNMA, and a traditional museum, and we have a foundation, all kind of being in the same space.
Spaces, yeah.
And I think that is a telling story that, everyone can survive in the same ecosystem, and there's an audience for all.
Right.
What do you-
Do you want to add to that? Okay. One of the things that I was thinking about with, say, Desert X, which Avesta has also been involved in, is the site specificity of that kind of an artwork, and whether it risks alienating audiences that may not physically be able to be in that space to experience it. I want to say, what is the responsibility for institutions, but overall the collective ecosystem to reduce the barriers of entry for people to engage with it, enter these spaces, get a ticket. Perhaps people who are living in the same country may not even know this exists, or be able to experience it from the sense of, having that language to understand what that means. So what responsibility does the ecosystem have in reducing that barrier of entry?
As well, first, Desert X, it's a desert biennale that happens every 2 years in the US and in Saudi Arabia now, in the ancient city of Alula. Avesta has worked with the Desert X Biennale in Alula to really engage all of the types of audiences that are living on the ground and that come to visit. Because, as you know, with contemporary art, there's a lot of pushback in terms of refusal to access the artworks through text, through explanations. People want to engage directly. I've heard a lot of people tell me, well, I don't enjoy it if I have to be told a 15-minute story before I can actually access the meaning of that work. But actually what you have in spaces such as Desert X is you have enormous artworks that are built for these locations, that engage with the landscape, that are fundamentally beautiful, that are in a very wide open space that is publicly accessible. But at the same time, the engagement that comes with it is very deep in the way that it's created by the organization. So what we created for them were tours where we organized visits for all of the schools of the region where children were brought directly. We created little learning kits for them and for the teachers to engage with them before the visit, so that when they arrived, they felt they already knew what was going on and they already understood both the vibe, the purpose, the visual narrative that the artists are trying to get to. And at the same time, they could directly engage with artwork. Some of them you can touch, which is very, especially for physical artwork, something absolutely new. And so we even created little booklets where you have more sensory elements. So I don't know if some of you have gone to deserts in the past, but there is something that is very surprising to a Westerner like me. It's the smell of the desert. It's absolutely stunning. And so we created booklets where kids could actually just scratch the surface and bring home with them a little souvenir of that location, where they could bring with them the smell of the desert back home. And they could continue to have the physical aspect of some of the artworks that are created with local materials directly in their little pocketable souvenir that they bring home. And this is another way of thinking about immersive art. Also, it's something that can be transferred and kept with you and experienced again and again back at home.
Yeah. And how does that contrast, I mean, within the Indian experience? Because I feel like museums in India and even artists have not, I mean, there's a lot of barriers of entry in that sense. The learning isn't to that level as yet. There's still a lot of inhibitions entering such spaces, let alone going further and creating an experience that has this, okay, I'm taking something back with me after that. I wonder, does it risk this idea of being a gimmick,
Yeah, definitely. I think in India, we have a lot of challenges because we have not grown up with museum culture. So
Exactly, yeah.
when we build any institution, like for example, at the art house, this was our biggest concern, that when you don't have an audience that is, known to going to museums or galleries or any place to see traditional artwork, then how do we even do something conceptual when we're doing a contemporary exhibition? How are we going to, transfer that knowledge to them and engage them? And we haven't found the right way yet, because we have to do a balance of where we are trying to simplify it to audiences. We are bringing an element, as I said, a second or a third sense with the artwork, or we work directly with the artist saying that, do something for us where, your work really can speak by itself. So, for example, our last exhibition in Jan, Liminal Caps, we
With
had...
Asim Waqif. I was
Yes.
going to talk about his work.
Exactly. With Asim's work, the sculpture that he produced in the art house was fantastic, with the workers from West Bengal who make the pandals for Durga Puja. He got them in the space, he made the sculpture, he decided to put music in it, and he allowed visitors to go into his artwork, touch it. Kids could climb on the bamboos, to some extent. And, the way the audience engaged with Asim's work, from whether it was a 2-year-old child, a 5-year-old child, to a 70-year-old person, was incredible. So I think, and it was his original thought process. It was not that we were deriving a work of a work of a work, which is another, as I said, another category. And we got an immense pleasure out of it. But of course, I think we realize that we need to talk to artists and, push their prolific side and sense and say, hey, when you're showing at institutions, can you, push the boundaries a bit with your own work?
Right. Because the institution also creates that environment to be able to support that in some sense. Right?
And she's right. People don't want to read text. You put text, or there's the attention span is just about 2 lines. It's true. It's true. And if it's complex, curatorial note, 3 words.
Right. Yeah.
Bang on. So for me, it starts at the basic where I feel that art should be accessible by everybody. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, it can be intimidating, even somebody like me, right? When I go to shows, etc. So I feel that is very important. And we've spoken about inclusion. And I think that needs to be really touched upon in terms of communications, in terms of how you want to design the experience. And secondly, I feel that whenever, right now, sorry to touch upon a cliche, but art is always stroke fashion, right? But I think art can be stroke music as well, right? So I'm just saying that when you create a similar environment, I think it'll encourage more people to actually come and then be part of the entire immersive experience within that. So I feel that also should be a good thing.
I mean, now there's a new wave that art is in food. So if you go to a Michelin star restaurant, there's a lot of inspiration, to and fro. So not one directional, and it's interesting.
One of the things that you've all touched upon in some way, shape, or form is the idea of technology, essentially, and how that's being used to amplify the experiences of the viewer and the audiences, but also how that retracts from the viewer's experience, right? So one of the things I have, the one question is, what are the technical and creative challenges that come about with technology? You spoke to some degree about the obsoleteness of the hardware and constantly needing to upgrade to that. But does it affect, I guess, one, the authenticity of the viewer's experience? And how much does it sort of shape the final outcome of an artwork?
So with technology, we need a different kind of skill set. So we need to bring in engineers.
Right.
We need to bring in data scientists. And then there needs to be a collaboration between creative people. So, people who come from institutions and people from this industry, and to make them understand, so working together, that collaborativeness requires training. So I think that's not a challenge, but that needs to be done.
As part of the institution.
As part of the institution. And as I think rightly she said, like that, personally, I would go to companies that work on technology. So for example, whether it's Super Blue or whether it's, culture, I forget the other name, Culture Solutions, they are up to date with the technology. So I would go to them and say that, can you help me? This is our vision, or this is something that we're looking at. Or then you work with an artist who's really on, their focus is on technology as part of their art. So whether it's Rafiq, who is an engineer, is a data scientist himself, has a team, and his artwork is part of using big data, and he's evolving as a studio constantly. Or someone like Studio Drift, where again technology is part of their art, so they have to evolve with technology.
Right.
So I think those would be my 3 approaches. So.
Absolutely. To add something, I would say that to a large extent today, in terms of conservation of this type of art, we see that some artists are willingly using tech that is going to very soon become obsolete. And this is a movement that we've seen since the 20th century, where I would say the commercial aspect of selling an artwork and having it remain as it is for the rest of eternity is not necessarily something that artists respond to in the same way that museums and gallerists will. Museums want works that will remain the same forever, whereas artists, within my experience, are much more at ease with the fact that an artwork is going to have a short lifespan and that it's going to degrade over time. And sometimes it's an integral part of their purpose and the meaning within the artwork. And so today we have some very medium-based art that is, in terms of conservation for museums, absolutely a challenge, because you need people who have the knowledge of the tech, but also who have the spare parts within their conservation studios so that the artworks can remain visible by audiences over the long term. You know, when you're thinking about VHS or when you're thinking about AI today, you know, AI tends to deform itself over some time and start creating hallucinations, etc. So I'm thinking now that it's going to become more and more of a challenge for institutions to, when they collect these types of work, to make them remain relevant over the long term. And maybe this is also part of the reflection for artists now, to see what is going to happen to these works over the long term and how they can play with that.
And also how that expands, I guess, in terms of an art market, like whether there's an art market for this type of art. Is it mostly institutions or larger, collections that can, even have the warehouse or the spaces to store these works, exhibit these works? It isn't something that you can simply just hang on a wall anymore, right? I mean, some of it is, but largely, if we're talking at scale.
I read somewhere in the Serpentine London study on art and technology that, to your point with art mark, a lot of these works are not bought by collectors, but the way that they, the gallery or say the production companies make money is through ticketing, and that's kind of how they're able to sustain the artwork costs.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, right now where I am at, so I'm actually trying to do the opposite. I'm going back to basics. Okay. And only when I feel the merit of using technology, because I'm so sorry to say, I mean, I think you spoke about Rafiq.
Yeah.
So his work, I think he started during pandemic. Or maybe before. I can't remember exactly.
Before.
Yeah, but probably that's the time I got exposed to it. So I feel that, he's got a niche, right? But in the digital world, to find that niche is not easy, if I may say so, right? Because it can start looking very repetitive, right? Yeah. So therefore, I was just a bit not smart, but I was a bit more practical or more realistic, that I think I need to. So, for example, even when I write a prompt in Chat GPT, I say please and thank yous. So, and the same goes for Midjourney. So I use them for my advantage right now, but I prefer going back to basics. But the time that I do involve an absolutely AR or whatever, it will be sort of very Vichitra sort of pertaining style. Yeah. So that's where I am. Yeah.
From a longevity perspective, I guess we'll do some parting thoughts because we're already at 1:30. But with respect to immersive art today, does it feel like a passing trend? Is there longevity in the space given the challenges from a technological perspective, from a audience adoption perspective? And how are institutions measuring success? Is it through ticketing? Is it through the emotional impact of the artwork, and of course the larger sort of public discourse that it generates, and how it's furthering conversations around art and the mediums of art?
I'll make it very short and quick. I think they need the content, the stories around the art. I think that's the core. And till then, it can last forever. Yeah.
I think in terms of longevity, to answer your question, as long as these experiences give people a sense of hope when they come into this space, a sense of accessibility, because those two emotions bring communities together. It gives them a sense of, okay, this is, I'm part of a cultural experience. And that cultural experience brings societies together, which is the most prevalent emotion, in our time, because of how divided the world is. So I think that if it hits that note, it will be relevant. Maybe its shape or form might change, but the experiential part of it will continue to remain relevant.
Absolutely. To add something to that, you were mentioning impact and measuring impact. Within the realm of immersive experiences, it's still very difficult to really see what is the lasting impact on audiences, qualitatively and quantitatively. quantitatively, beyond asking people on a scale of 5, let's say, how much they enjoyed the experience, there's not a lot of work that is conducted on lasting impact. So people will enjoy immersive experiences, but I think it's up to the institutions now and to the people advising them to create new ways of measuring the impact of these moments that they offer audiences in terms of learning, in terms of creating lasting memories, and in terms of also giving audiences a real incentive to go and see sometimes the physical works once they've seen the digital or digital versions of
100%.
So it's now up to these spaces to create methods that will really track in a non-invasive way visitors then incentive to go beyond that type of experience, and to see, well, once they've seen the Van Gogh experience, to take like a very cliche example, how many of them who had never seen the actual paintings before have then been converted
To go back
to
to
museums, and that will require some heavy work in terms of social impact analysis and research. So there's partnerships to create with universities and sociologists and anthropologists there to really measure that over the long term. It's going to take time, but that's what corporate social responsibility is for. And this is really, I think, the next frontier for measuring impact right now.
Yeah. Tejal, would you like
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to add to the Van Gogh bit. What was the one point of information? So there's this show called Emily in Paris on Netflix, and in the first season, she goes to the Atelier, the Lumiere, the Van Gogh experience, and they did a study after that all American not all, but 80% of American tourists that visit Paris now go see that show. The immersive exhibition of Van Gogh, specifically at the Atelier de Lumiere, because she did it in her she did it in the show, and they saw an increase in ticket sales from, say, about 1.1 million. After that show, it was 5.5, and it's gone increasingly high since then. So that's another way, they are using impact, social media, and, entertainment impact to this. And I think there's also some huge correlation to that.
I think, thank you so much. It remains to be seen what that impact is going forward, how people, the audiences, but also institutions and museums and, other corporate social responsibility, wings of organizations create an ecosystem largely that enable lasting impact and of course, encourage learning along the way. And it's been such a pleasure to speak to the three of you to gain a deeper understanding. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vasudha.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure as well.
Thank you, audience.
Yeah. Zoya, would you like to take? We can open it up for any questions if audiences have questions. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great panel. I've actually been to Alula and Desert X. And the museum, Fatema, you were referring to is Paradox Museum, which is also, I've not been there, but it's on my bucket list. But anyway.
So it's not mine, huh?
We can go together, maybe.
Okay, done.
So it's amazing, you mentioned all these experiences and these examples. And I've been to also, I come to the art house quite often, toilet paper.
Thank you.
Rocked. But where, if you're looking at museums today, at least in India, that has this cool, hip factor, the Indian aesthetic or the Indian factor seems to be missing for me. You mentioned the pandals and all, but I'm talking on a bigger, immersive thing. Are there any examples where they are taking Indian art and making it relevant? Like I was in London, I went at Naomi or Tyra, which one of them, I mixed them up.
The VNMA.
You walk like, not that I did it, but I said kids doing it. But you have that happening there. But with our aesthetic, with our miniature paintings for that matter, I mean, you can do so much bringing them to life. Has anyone done anything in your people's?
So to her point, right, the fact that because it's expensive, the technology is really expensive, and the companies that have the technology, they need to, it's for them, it's a mathematical calculation. So I hope that, someone sees that there might be profitability to it, and they do take certain miniature paintings, they, extract those visuals and project it in a high-res projector. But I think it just comes down to how expensive it is, and does it work?
What happens to the learning of the Indian, when you're trying to teach kids, take them to museums, they are seeing international stuff, right? They're not seeing what India stands for, not Blue China for China, which used to be the titles before for art when we grew up. But, where are they going to learn? Because you're all correct. They don't read. They get distracted in a nanosecond. You can, if they're doing something with their hands or eyes, they'll stay there for at least 5 or 10. So how do we encourage that sort of critical thinking and learning?
So, hi. So you got a very valid point. So when I did my first exhibit, I did try my best to touch upon, although my background is being a fashion photographer and then a filmmaker, etc. But now, as I said, that I'm trying to go back to basics. So this time, I don't know if you've seen Spot the Different exhibit, but I have tried. Yeah. So I've tried doing that, and miniatures, talking about that, to me, it's the most beautiful form of art that I respect. And a lot of my referencing actually starts from there. Okay. So as Vichitra, we have plans of doing a beautiful immersive exhibit for children specifically, done in miniature style. Yeah. So everything's going to be live, and then we're going to do this beautiful world. So I absolutely respect your...
Wonderful. Hope we'll see it at the art house.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a plan.
Something that hasn't been done yet here, to my knowledge, but that could be very interesting for the Indian market and for Indian awareness of the heritage, the very rich heritage that exists here in India. Something similar to what we did in Saudi. I'm coming back to Saudi again. It's a project we conducted for a region that is an emerging region, which I will not name because of NDA reasons, but where basically the region is rich in terms of history for all of the monotheistic religions, as well as the history of humanity. And they were organizing trails and visits for local residents as well as international visitors, where it was very physical journeys within the mountains, within the canyons, etc. And they wanted to create a moment of reflection within that journey. And so for them, we created a moment where we used the landscape as an amphitheater, where we then went to communities and extracted from their legends, from their storytelling, from their living heritage practices, a narrative that could shed light and make on the heritage of the region, on the history of the region, and make both local audiences proud of all of this, but also shed light on this history for international visitors. And so what we created was not very technologically advanced, let's say, but it was, in terms of content, very rich. So we used, just video mapping on the stone surfaces and the location that was provided by the natural heritage to create a space that was completely immersive, where people were within, under the sky, the starry night, engaging with this millennial story and history of the legends of Arabia, of the practices around the incense road, etc. So I think there is a lot to be done with India's heritage right now, and in the beautiful landscape of India. So this is what I want to be focusing on in the next years here. So if you guys have ideas and people who want to work on that type of project, I'm absolutely open to doing that.
Hi. Thank you to all the excellent speakers. I am really glad that I visited Tejal's exhibition right before coming for this panel, so it made all the more sense. My question is to you, Tejal.
Sure.
And for the sake of this question, please allow me to create this false dichotomy between artists and, let's say, immersive artists.
Sure.
Because immersive art is more experiential, it's more accessible, it's more engaging, does it parallelly mean that there is an increased vulnerability or censorship for the artist at stake? Is there a...
Not really. I mean, to me, I think sorry. For me, sorry. Oh, no. I mean, sorry. For me, I think my existence is based on the masters, like the ones you named, and from their work that I've learned. So for me as an artist, I treat my journey very separate. I just feel that I think magic has been already created by so many masters. So what's my contribution to art? And this is what I choose to do. So, I mean, I honestly don't see it as it's just a continuous journey, and it's just a path that I'm following. Yeah, by no means, no.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry, I know you're running out of time.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, but please go ahead.
My name is Amit. I'm an editor-in-chief of a media house called stirworld.com. We've covered most of your projects, including Lula. And well, in fact, we started covering new media arts as one of the key focus on Stir. And I've been part of many dialogues and discussions like yourself. We talk about immersive media. My only observation and a reflection on what I hear is that I think the access of public programming for immersive media have to shift. The audience engagement have to shift. Yes, you're right that they can coexist in the same economy or the same under the same universe, but it might alienate the audience when we put, on one hand we have masters and moderns and a very traditional format of exposing and expressing art forms. But when we're talking about new media arts, I think the audience development and audience programming needs to be completely looked at a very, very different scale and access than what we are doing at this point of time, even under this banner, because that audience is very different, and the audience is not most of us sitting here.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think the other interesting thing about that is how do you create that sort of immersive experience for audiences across language, across class barriers, across financial barriers. So yeah, thank you for that.
Sure. Thank you.
I'll give it to Zoya, but thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same here. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Big thank you to all of our panelists for elucidating immersive experiences so well and for giving us so much more food for thought. I would like to thank our audience for being here with us today, as well as a big thank you to our sponsor, the Kiranadar Museum of Art, who is supporting our speaker series, as well as Birla Opus for this beautiful auditorium that we're all sitting in today. I would like to invite you all back for our next panel at 2:30, Gateway to Influence. Thank you.
Thank you.